Well, that was news at 10. Coming up, we've got the press preview where we take a look at the Sunday papers, including this on the front of the Sunday Express. It leads on the news there that 7 children have been injured after an inflatable slide collapsed at a fireworks event in Woking. Our breaking news this evening too. We'll be talking about the front pages shortly with the journalist and author Rachel Shubby and the writer Benedict Spence. That's coming up next. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. First, though, our top stories here tonight, and 7 children have suffered potentially serious injuries after an inflatable slide collapsed at a fireworks display in Woking. A minute's silence has been held before Leicester City's match against Cardiff to honour their chairman, who died alongside 4 others in a helicopter crash last week. And a letter signed by more than 50 business leaders has warned that the government's Brexit plan would not deliver frictionless trade and says the final decision should be left to the people. Hello there, you're watching the press preview. Our first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. Over the next half an hour, we're going to be talking through the headlines with the journalist and author Rachel Shubby and the writer Benedict Spence. So good evening, both of you.
Hello. Good evening.
So let's take a look then at the front pages. And the Sunday Express leads on the news that 7 children have been injured after an inflatable slide collapsed at a fireworks event in Woking. In the Sunday Times, Theresa May is said to be about to present a secret Brexit plan to Parliament after, they say, winning concessions from Brussels. The Observer leads on fresh allegations against the businessman Aaron Banks. The Mail on Sunday says the government is furious over the BBC's coverage of the budget, with one bulletin being called the broadcaster's most biased in its history, according to the paper. We've approached the BBC for a comment on that story and we'll bring it to you when we get it. The Sunday Mirror has allegations of an affair between a Grenfell family member and a support worker, they allege, and Labour MP Emma Dent-Coad, who's commented on the story, is pictured there. The Sunday Telegraph leads with a call by the Health Secretary for employers to offer their staff free fruit to keep them healthy. And after destroying 1,000 working dogs who could have been rehomed, the Army is facing a backlash from the public. That's according to the Daily Star on Sunday. So welcome again to Rachel Shubby and Benedict Spence. And you've picked out the Sunday Times to kick off with because they have a dramatic headline there, May's secret Brexit deal. So this is their political editor, Tim Shipman. So what is he saying is going on, according to his exclusive, as they call it?
Well, presumably that the government has actually managed to secure a deal against all odds. I think it'd probably be wise to wait, actually, until any such deal is put to Parliament before we start rolling out the red carpet and hanging the bunting. But
well, yes, and before you do carry on, I should say that a spokesman for Theresa May's office has described the story as speculation and saying that negotiations are ongoing. So we should say that before we
Well, yes, absolutely. I suppose they would say that because nothing is agreed until everything is agreed with the European Union. But I think to give you an idea of actually how precarious any deal is going to be, in the same story we have David Davis already coming out and saying that actually what the Prime Minister needs to do now, in light of any such deal that she may or may not have agreed with the European Union, is to actually release the legal advice that her and other members of the Cabinet have received, him citing that, of course, it was what did for Tony Blair was the sort of confusion over the legality of the Iraq War. That, to me, sounds like already the Eurosceptic wing of the Conservative Party are sharpening their bayonets for this fight. It doesn't sound like they're just going to roll over, even though other cabinet ministers have been quoted as saying that it could have been written by Jacob Rees-Mogg. It's so Eurosceptic.
Well, that's right. I mean, but there are different elements to it, aren't there? And the way that it's written suggests that there are some elements that the Remainers will be happy about and might even bring Labour on side, and there are other elements that will be that the more Eurosceptic members of Parliament might be happy with. Is that how you see it? It's broken down into different measures, isn't it?
Yeah, the key thing seems to be obviously the issue that has been, a problem for so long has been the Irish border and the fact that nobody wants a hard border between the island of Ireland and Northern Ireland. And the main thing coming out of this piece is that the EU has agreed that Britain can write up some kind of arrangement by which it can stay, all of it can stay in the customs union until such time as there is another way of making sure that there is no hard border between Ireland and Northern Ireland. Now, the problem with this, of course, is that how do you write up a legal agreement to keep Britain in the customs union with so little time to go? I mean, how do you guarantee all those things that have to be guaranteed? Environmental protections, workers' protections, all those things that both sides will want to happen. Britain will want those to happen for our own sake. The EU will want those to happen because it won't want Britain to have any unfair advantage over it in any kind of, if there's going to be a sort of equality of trading. So this is really frustrating because all along we all knew that the UK had to stay in the customs union. Theresa May couldn't face off the hard Brexiteers in her own party to get to this situation, which inevitably we were going to get to. And now we only have a few weeks to sort out the legalities. The thinking is that she now feels that she can face down the Eurosceptics in her party, or at least that she won't lose the ones that she can't afford to lose, that she will scare them off by saying, look, it's either this or a hard Brexit, or no deal, sorry. And, sorry?
No, sorry, finish your point.
No, I was just saying, and then the calculation will be how many Labour MPs can she peel off to support this? Because, of course, this still won't meet Labour's 6 tests.
No.
So
I think it's... Well, you must also look at this in terms of the short term, what is coming on the horizon. I mean, it is generally viewed that the European Union is we all know it's in something of an economic crisis with what's happening in the south, especially in Italy, and that something of a global financial slowdown is probably on the horizon in the next 18 months. The UK government has had a really bad time of this. There are very few plans in place, as far as we know, up until the announcement of this, that there could be any sort of cohesion over. So a short-term deal, some sort of understanding, as it were, is probably in both sides' interest financially for the short term, when it comes to jobs and when it comes to the currency markets. But as I said, the ERG will view this as a Faustian bargain, and I don't think they're going to let it lie for a second.
Well, you say that, and yet it also does talk, doesn't it, about the fact that Theresa May is set to secure a political deal on a future economic partnership with the European Union that will allow Britain to keep open the prospect of a free trade deal resembling that of Canada, rather. That's one of the things that they feel that might appease Jacob Rees-Mogg and people with similar views.
Absolutely, but I think for most people of that persuasion, at the end of the day, if there is some sort of transition agreement, which is essentially what this is, it's some sort of transition deal, they will always see it, members of the ERG on the Tory right will always see this as a potential mechanism by which Britain will be kept in the European Union with an unfavourable deal, and they will always rally against that as long as it stands. And
so the big question would be how people will vote and whether they feel that it's this versus a no deal. Whether or not that will focus the mind.
Yeah, that's whether it will focus the mind of her own party. Yeah, that's the question that's raised in this piece. Whether she can basically beat down the Eurosceptics in her own party and say, look, it's this or it's no deal, and no deal would be a disaster, and there's absolutely no way that's going to happen. So,
isn't that the decision for every MP, though? Not just the ones in her party.
And then it will be, but I think the calculation for Labour and other MPs will be different, which is this deal any good, right? I mean, they won't be interested in saving the party in the same way that the Conservatives will be. They'll be interested in saving the country, not unreasonably, you might think, the job of Parliament. So their calculation will be somewhat different.
OK, let's move on. Still on the subject of Brexit, but you've spotted a double-page spread inside the Sunday Express, and they describe it as the Remainers' final big push to stop Brexit.
Yeah, so this is apparently Remainer MPs are. We keep hearing rumours of this, that there's going to be a launch of a new party, a centrist party. It's been rumbling.
The coming of the great centrist party, yes. Yeah. It's going to solve everything.
So the Express, according to the Sunday Express, this is going to happen now, very, very soon. MPs from all the parties, Labour, the Tories and the Lib Dems, all those three parties will be launching this party next month. And their calculation is that there is enough of a constituency. There are a constituency of voters who are not represented by either party specifically over Brexit currently. And I think I'm not sure there's a constituency for a centrist party. I mean, I think the Lib Dems proved that in the last election. But there is certainly a growing momentum for the idea of a people's vote. We saw them tweet earlier today that in every Labour constituency, there is now support for a people's vote. And this was tweeted out by the Labour MP for Wakefield, Mary Cray, which was 63% Leave. And she says there's now 55% support for a people's vote. So that does seem to be something that's growing.
Mm. And we know that 50 business leaders are warning as well today that they say the government's Brexit plan wouldn't deliver frictionless trade. Is the concern that they're raising. They're talking about a people's vote on the final deal.
Well, I mean, that stance is nothing new. There have been plenty of letters sent in the past by all sorts of notable people calling for a second vote. And yeah, the thing is, actually, I am amongst a minority of Brexiteers who actually feel that, in principle, a people's vote, a second referendum on the actual deal itself would not have been a bad thing. It would have been a democratic thing. I think that there's nothing wrong with that in principle. I think practically it's too late at this stage in the day, although of course,
like the logistics.
Well, yes, exactly. Although of course, you know, who knows how long Theresa May's deal may hold up? There may be more time for that down the line. But on the subject of the creation of this centrist party, I think what is probably going to happen is that we are going to have the two major parties splitting in some form. Whether or not that actually allows for a centrist party to replace them, I'm less sure. Because I don't really see how there can be a meeting of minds, really, between a lot of Tories who are Remainers and the majority of Labour MPs who are Remainers as well. I don't actually think they meet in the middle on lots of things. And if that's the only thing that they can agree on, I don't think that's actually a very sound basis for an entirely new political party. I think you're more likely to see four factions sort of in two loose alliances with each other, which are vaguely flexible, than a new centrist party that's going to hold any weight.
OK, and on the subject of the people's vote, of course, the government line is it's not going to happen.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Right, we're going to take a pause. Plenty more to talk about after the break, though, including the unusual items replacing chocolates in this year's Advent calendars. That's coming up. And we'll keep you up to date with all the developments on that story. But in the meantime, let's go back to the press preview with me, Rachel Shabby and Benedict Spence. And we're going to turn our attention now, she says, quickly looking at the list, to the Telegraph front page, smoothly done. And their main story, give staff free food. Fruit, even.
If only it were just free food.
Free meals.
Free fruit.
Well, yeah, well, exactly. Well, personally,
every day.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, actually, if we're talking about just giving out free fruit, I'd rather that an employer would just give me the money for the fruit and I can go get a Yorkie bar, because that's going to wake me up a lot more.
That's
make me feel a lot happier.
I know
that's not what this is about.
Short-term fix.
I know, exactly. But
and other bars are available.
That's the point of this story.
Oh, I understand entirely what the story is, but this is me we're talking about. Yeah. But this is the new Health Minister, Matt Hancock, saying that businesses should be handing out free fruit to members of staff in order to, I suppose, make them healthier, which I suppose comes from some sort of view that having a healthier workforce will make them happier and more productive and more likely to spend more days at work and off ill. It's a nice idea, but to me, it just sort of stems from a sort of an idea of quite sort of patronising attitude towards members of the population. I mean, who is this health minister to say that we aren't getting enough fruit and vegetable in our day anyway? And frankly, there is just something...
Are we, and would it make people eat more fruit if it was
yes, I think in the summertime people do, but in the wintertime,
it's
actually,
quite tough in the winter,
a salad
isn't it?
isn't necessarily what you want. A piece of fruit isn't what you want. It's entirely dependent on your mood, on how the day is going. I think, yeah, I'm not entirely sure fruit is what people want.
The thing is, I don't mind the Health Secretary saying, you know, companies should lay on free fruit, fine, but he's saying companies should lay on free fruit because that will help sick workers get back to health and reduce the burden on the NHS, which is an entirely different proposition, isn't it? I mean, it's not like that's not a get out. You don't get away with underfunding the NHS by making companies give their staff bananas. That's not going to cut it.
Yeah, I'm sure that it'll
Do
have a
something else.
negligible amount. And I would say to anybody, when your employer gives you lemons, find a new employer, because it's not a sensible idea.
I'm going to move on because none of us can say free fruit. It's
quite
too
tough,
difficult.
isn't it?
So let's move on to page 23 of the Mail, and we're staying with the subject of the NHS. They are saying, it's not they, it's the Prime Minister, I noticed now, that she is suggesting the Tories are the party of the NHS. That's what she's saying.
Yeah, and we're all trying hard not to laugh at that because, I mean, we all remember what happened last winter, for example, when the NHS, as a result of chronic underfunding, we had patients in corridors and we had an emergency and a crisis.
Since then, they would say they're pumping loads more money into it.
Yeah, they would say that, but they're not pumping enough into it. And this is right, it was a really weird Conservative strategy over the last few days. Yesterday, they were talking about reducing the size of student loans. Today, they're saying they're the party of the NHS. They're all obviously trying to camp on Labour turf, but it just doesn't wash. I mean, I don't think anyone seriously thinks that the Conservative Party, nobody would naturally associate that party with the NHS. And when it comes to student fees, well, why would you support a party that reduces them as opposed to the party that has pledged to scrap them? So.
I mean, in terms of whether or not the Tories are the natural party of the NHS, as you say, they have increased spending. It's now at record levels. But as with most things they seem to touch, it's still not working. So in that way, perhaps you could say, yes, the Tories are the natural party of the NHS, because anything they try just doesn't seem to work. The problem I feel with...
harsh on the NHS.
Well, it's not so much the NHS. I just think the Tory party in general is doing a pretty bad job at most things, as we've seen with Brexit. But I think, ultimately, we have to look at where the NHS currently sits when you compare it with other health systems in Europe, but also around the world. A study, I think, that was published by the WHO a couple of weeks ago said that the NHS was the 37th most efficient healthcare system in the world. It ranked behind countries like Algeria and Slovakia, and that's not to do down those healthcare systems. But there are clearly issues with the health service. We go over this every single year. No doubt there will be another winter crisis this year. And the problem is that there is absolutely no even thought about radically looking at how we change the functioning of the NHS, rather than just pumping money into it.
It's interesting that you look at that survey, though, and you don't look at the survey that shows that that Britain is not high on the list of which country pays more into the NHS.
OK, we are going to have to delay this debate because we promised we'd talk about advent calendars. I know and we've only got about 30 seconds. So very briefly, there we go. You can get more than just a sweet little picture in your advent calendar, apparently, these days.
Apparently now you can get screwdrivers instead, screwdriver elements or protein bars, which just seems to miss the whole point of an advent calendar. I mean...
If your child isn't doing well enough on the rugby team at school, buy it a protein bar advent calendar. Give it a really good message this year. It's time to bulk up a little bit. I just think this is actually quite a sad story in many ways.
Sad.
It's meant to be the time of enjoying yourself and having a little bit of a treat. Why on earth would you want a protein bar?
OK, we must leave it there, but we will see you both again at 11:30. Thanks, Moment, very much indeed. Coming up next, it's the press preview, where we take a look at the Sunday papers, including this on the front of the Sunday Express. It leads on the now 8 children injured when an inflatable slide collapsed in Woking at a fireworks display. We'll be talking about lots of the headlines tonight with the journalist and author Rachel Shabby and the writer Benedict Spence. That's coming up next. Hello there, you're watching the press preview. Our first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. Over the next half an hour, we're going to be talking through the headlines with journalist and author Rachel Shabby and the writer Benedict Spence. So, hello, both of you. So let's take a look then at the front pages. And the Sunday Express leads on the news that 8 children have been injured after an inflatable slide collapsed at a fireworks event. The Sunday Times says Theresa May is set to present a secret Brexit plan to Parliament after winning concessions from Brussels. The Observer leads on fresh allegations against the businessman Aaron Banks. The Mail on Sunday says the government is furious over the BBC's coverage of the budget, calling it the most biased in its history. And we've approached the BBC for a comment on that story. The Sunday Mirror has claims of an affair between a Grenfell family member and a support worker. The Labour MP Emma Dent-Coad, who's commented on the story, is pictured there. The Sunday Telegraph leads with a call by the Health Secretary for employers to offer their staff free fruit to keep them healthy. And after destroying 1,000 dogs who could have been rehomed, the army is facing a backlash from the public. That's according to the Daily Star on Sunday. So let's get stuck into some of those stories now with Rachel Shabby and Benedict Spence. And you've picked out the Sunday Times to kick off with, and what they describe as May's secret Brexit deal. This is been claimed as an exclusive by Tim Shipman, their political editor. So what is he saying what deals have been done?
Well, we seem to have some sort of agreement, that's what he's suggesting, but that it is a bespoke arrangement whereby the EU will write some sort of special legally binding agreement which will negate the need for their EU-designed backstop to do with Northern Ireland that will encompass the whole of the United Kingdom, and that there will also be an exit clause that will be set in which will allow us to leave the European Union later on, which is meant to then placate Eurosceptics. So essentially it's a fudge. You have something in there to try to appeal to both sides, but because there is no real time limit on it and it is neither in nor out, it is simply a way of prevaricating until further down the line some other sort of arrangement can be agreed to. Now, I'm sure that Mrs May will feel that this is possibly the best that she can do at this moment in time, and I suspect it probably is. I don't think that it is going to be acceptable by the ERG, as much as Mr Shipman says that some cabinet members think that it will. We already have David Davis coming out and saying absolutely now what she must do is publish the details of all legal advice that the cabinet has been given with regards to this deal, because in his words it was the obfuscation of legal issues when it came to Tony Blair and the Iraq War that did for his credibility in his administration, and that if she doesn't do the same, it will undermine her own position. So as you can already see, we don't even know what this secret deal is. We don't know any of the details. We can already see the knives are out and they're being sharpened.
Indeed, and we should also say that a spokesman for Theresa May's office has described this story as speculation, and they say that negotiations are ongoing. Bearing that in mind, we should also point out there are a couple of other developments that they're reporting on. They suggest that progress has been made on the Irish border question. They're saying that it's been agreed that checks can happen in the marketplace, I think is how they describe it, in shops and warehouses rather than on the border. And they also talk about the fact that there's said to be on course, Theresa May, to secure a political deal on a future economic partnership, which leaves open the option of forming a Canada-style deal. So they're another thing that perhaps those more Eurosceptic might find appealing. So do you think she's going to manage to find a course that will keep both sides of her party happy enough to vote this through?
All those things can't be true of the same deal. That's the problem. You can't have a potential future relationship in a sort of Canada-style trade agreement if you're also still in the customs union, not in the EU. You're still in the customs union, as is the whole of the UK, as a way of avoiding a hard border between the island of Ireland and Northern Ireland, which nobody wants. Nobody wants that hard border for very good reasons. So it's hard to see how this deal can be both those things, but it's also hard to see how the EU will, with the UK, write some kind of agreement, legal agreement, whereby the UK does stay in the customs union, but has, they will need guarantees over all the environmental regulations and labour regulations and all those kind of things to ensure that there's still parity between the two, and to ensure for Britain, for the UK, that we still get those protections. All that can't happen in a few weeks. It's really hard to imagine. So that's the logistics of this deal on its face, and then we have to deal with how it's going to go down within her own party. Now, this piece is reporting that it's likely that she's now going to face down the hard levers in her party and say, tough, it's this deal or it's no deal, and no deal is absolutely impossible. We're not going to have that. It would be a disaster. Therefore, you have to accept this deal, or you have to accept that you've brought down the Conservative government. So that's, that's thought to be the stick that she's holding in her hand.
And will that work? I mean, that will concentrate minds, won't it? That dilemma.
It will concentrate minds. I think, especially in the wake of the budget, and a lot of people talking about that being very much a budget with one eye on a general election in the future. Certainly, this would seem to suggest that that is the case, the idea that she might then be going to the hardline Eurosceptics and saying, well, it is this way or it is probably going to be the end of this Brexit deal and possibly the end of this government. You'll be bringing down the Conservative government. I think there's probably a lot of truth to that we have an election on the horizon. I do just wonder, though, frankly, whether or not the average Eurosceptic would be too bothered about that, because, of course, for a lot of real hardliners, what is most important to them is Brexit in principle, almost at any cost, and that is what they want. So it really will come down now, if you will, to the stones of these Tory Eurosceptics, whether or not they are prepared to face the Prime Minister down. And I wouldn't put it past them.
OK, and I think I understand it. She's meeting the Cabinet this week.
Yeah.
And obviously the hope is that they'll resurrect another summit in November. So I'm sure we'll learn more details as time goes on. In the meantime, let's crack on with the Sunday Express, a double-page spread here, which talks about Remainers' final push to stop Brexit. So what are they suggesting is happening here?
They're suggesting that the idea that's been rumbling along for a good few years now is actually going to come to pass, which is that there will be a sort of centrist party, a Remainer party forming within the next month. This will be, it's thought to be MPs from the Labour Party, the Conservatives and the Lib Dems. They hope to launch this new party next month specifically to thwart Brexit. It's hard to see where the constituency for this will be. We already have said that, you know, the Remain party in the last election didn't really do so well, the Lib Dems. So it's hard to see what the constituency for that will be. However, it is definitely the case that there is more momentum building around the People's Vote campaign. And we're hearing today, according to the People's Vote campaign, they have a new survey that suggests that all of Labour's constituencies, in every constituency where there is a sitting Labour MP, there is now a majority in support of a People's Vote, which is quite strong information, if true.
And business leaders, we understand, have written a letter, more than 50 at least, calling for a People's Vote on the final deal. Do you agree that the momentum is building, given that the government is ruling one out?
Yes, I think that there is some momentum building. I'm not sure how much there is. I think, you know, evidence to either side is pretty sketchy, and we don't trust polls these days, frankly.
Yeah.
Those often get it wrong. But I think there is certainly a momentum building for it. And I think the principle behind a second vote, as much as many Brexiteers say it is, you know, a betrayal of democracy, well, it's clearly not. But actually, I wonder, with what we were just saying about this deal and about how it comes down to members of the ERG and how they respond to the Prime Minister's deal, whether or not, were there to be the creation of a successful centrist party, not even a successful centrist party, just the apparition of one, if you were to combine that with the idea of some sort of a deal which sort of leaves us in limbo, not quite in, not quite out of the European Union, with no deadline to that, no date on when we can leave, I think that might really harden the resolve of the Eurosceptics, because they will see this as a threat, should it come to pass, that Brexit then can be reversed. So if there is any likelihood of a new party, you know, exclusively dedicated to remaining in the European Union, arising whilst this deal is in place, I think that's what could end up sinking it, frankly.
OK, let's move on and try and squeeze in one more story before we go to the break, and that is the front of the Mail on Sunday. They are reporting on complaints, they say, an official complaint from Downing Street to the BBC over its budget coverage. That's what they are reporting.
I actually feel very sorry for the BBC, because they get it from both sides, always. And we know why it is that they get it from both sides. They try so unbelievably hard to be absolutely neutral on everything. There can be no opinion either way. And of course, then when they invite other people of differing perspectives onto their programme, then they are accused of giving those people a platform, of pandering to this sort of bias. You hear it endlessly with the Today programme. And of course, earlier in the week, we had Lord Adonis deciding he was going to write a letter to the BBC because he was unhappy with who was appearing on the Andrew Marr show. And before that, writing to say that they'd cancelled a programme that was basically just an interview with him about his campaign to overturn Brexit. I just feel that it finds itself in the middle of a cultural crossfire where, because it is neither pandering to either side and trying to give a voice to either side, it will never be able to win.
And the BBC, it says that on page 2, the BBC have refused to apologise for its coverage, describing the research as the first detailed analysis of the budget, which was clearly attributed to the Resolution Foundation. That's the heart of what they're talking about. They're saying that they talked about whether the budget favoured the rich or the poor, didn't they?
I mean, yeah, this is what the Daily Mail is complaining about. But it's interesting that they never complain. I mean, you know, the BBC and other broadcasters regularly use think tanks that you could argue are right-wing, the Institute of Economic Affairs, the Adam Smith Institute, essentially neoliberal free market think tanks that are presented as independent and neutral in some way. We never hear a peep from the Daily Mail over that, but they seem to be up in arms over the Resolution Foundation, which, you know, is an independent, non-partisan think tank. It has a Tory peer as one of its executive chairmen, and it describes itself as a think tank which aims to improve the standard of living of low and middle-income families. I mean...
OK. I'm only rushing because we ought to go to a break. But,
let's do it.
OK, let's do it. Let's go to that break.
The IEA are lovely people. I need to put that out.
OK, but we are coming back in just a moment, and we're going to be talking about the Health Minister's plea to bosses to give staff free fruit. That's coming up. Welcome back. You're watching the Press Preview. With me tonight, Rachel Shabby and Benedict Spence. And we're going to look at the Sunday Telegraph's main story. And this is the suggestion that bosses should give their employees free fruit. And it's a push by the Health Secretary, isn't it?
Yeah, I have to say, you read this, and the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, says that employers should do more to help improve the health of their staff and the nation by doing things like offering them free fruit, bite loans and counselling services. And you think, yeah, great. I mean, it would be nice if they also offered them, you know, better contracts, scrap zero-hour contracts, gave them benefits, gave them holiday pay, gave them sick pay. You know, that might also foster a healthier workforce,
sure
more than, say, a
encouraging...
few bananas. I don't know, I'm just guessing. So...
But he's the Health Secretary, so those aren't his issues, are they?
Not his
he's
issues.
Focusing on the health of the nation.
Well,
so is it a good idea in that context?
He's saying it's a good idea insofar that as he wants to reduce the burden on the NHS. Now, I'm not sure he understands really what the NHS does.
We are through the looking glass if that's the measures that we've got to. How we're going to solve the health
But
crisis.
generally, preventative measures are a good thing, aren't they?
Course.
Yeah,
Oh, absolutely.
Of course.
Eating fruit healthy, would you agree with that? And that potentially that could make us
Well,
healthier?
it depends how much fruit you're going to eat. But yes, I mean, normally 5 a day is supposed to be quite healthy. But one of the things actually that I found very interesting about the budget that was just passed was that there is going to be more money put into the NHS. This has been the case actually for a very long time. There never seems to be that much money put into schools or education about actually, like you say, preventing issues, health issues coming to the fore. Now, if one of these issues that we are facing is a crisis of obesity, well, presumably it would be better to tackle that before people get to the workplace and ROBs. I mean...
Is that a reason not to do it in the workplace, though?
It's not a reason not to do it in the workplace, but actually, you know, it just seems like, as you were saying, something of a nothing sort of token sort of thing. And I mean, lots of companies already seem to do it. It's more of a sort of a pleasantry sort of thing. That's nice.
But also
it's not
fund
going
the
to,
NHS.
Well, yeah, it's not going to solve a health crisis.
Well,
it's such a nonsense sort of thing to suggest is going to be a helpful thing in the long term.
Well, talking of funding the health service, it leads us into the Prime Minister's article that she's written in the Mail on Sunday, where she claims that the Tories are the natural party of the NHS.
They are the natural party of the NHS because they're going to alleviate the burden on the NHS by making companies provide staff with bananas.
I'm not sure if that's her point.
Is that not her point? I mean, it should be her point because she doesn't really have any other one to stand on. I mean, I'm not sure that anybody really associates the Tories with the NHS, given the funding crisis that the NHS is in. All over last winter, all we heard was how, from people who actually work in the NHS, of how the effects of underfunding, short-staffed, and was talking about an entirely avoidable crisis over winter.
Well, she would now say we're now putting a load of money into the NHS in the hope of improving it.
Yeah.
Well, they are doing that. I mean, I will go back to what I said before, which is that my view is that for a lot of the issues that people have which are clogging up the NHS, it is because we have reached a stage in civilization where we are able to make what would have once upon a time been fatal diseases chronic, essentially, where you are able to live like she's able to live with diabetes. That seems to be the big overall message that she's giving, that because she uses the NHS for her diabetes, there goes, she understands it. But the thing is, if we're therefore keeping people alive longer, that is going to cost more money. And as you say, yes, the healthcare system, however you decide to fund it, will need more funding, but we do a lot better by tackling these issues at the source. And I think that means more money for education.
We could just fund it as
not
much
the
as
healthcare
Germany or
system.
France does,
OK.
you know.
Let's move on to advent calendars, because we are nearly 4 weeks away from the need for one. And this is the suggestion
Stop buying
that
them.
these days, I have confessed that I was always too mean to buy my children ones with chocolate in them, and they just had pretty pictures, which should be satisfying enough, wouldn't you think?
Yeah.
Apparently you can get ones with gin and tonic, with crisps, with screwdrivers and socks.
Screwdrivers
Good or
are all
bad
set.
in 10 seconds.
I mean, protein
You can get
bars
up
just
to all
seems to be-
kinds of mischief with gin and tonic and screwdrivers. That could be a great deal of fun. Perhaps not very
Apparently-
civilised, but quite fun.
The problem with this gin and tonic
Okay.
one is that it's gin on one day and tonic on the other, so you have to save them up.
We have a good day and a bad day.
Yeah.
We're out of time.
It'll
but,
teach your children resilience.
Rachel
to do that.
and Benedict, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.